I lived in a small Midwestern town with a population of about 400, and it seemed like everyone or a group of people was messing with the women in the small town. This must have started around 6 or 7 years ago when I was around 13. My grandpa has owned a small house just off the highway, right smack dab in the middle of town for over 30 years now. Around code times, my aunt moved in with him, and my grandpa is a truck driver, so he's gone a good chunk of the time. I would stay with my aunt quite a bit. We had no Wi-Fi, so most of our pastime was spent coloring, listening to music, or telling scary stories, mostly family stories. One night, while my aunt was alone, she said she heard a metal jingling, but ignored it. Another few days went by and my grandpa came home to find the lock on his cellar door in pieces on the ground as if they were cut by bolt cutters. My aunt concluded that this must have been what she had heard. One night I was sleeping in my room when I randomly and abruptly woke up for no reason. This was not normal for me, and I felt very uneasy. The only sound I could hear was my mother snoring from the next room over on the couch. I rolled over and tried to go back to sleep, but my need to use the bathroom was growing more urgent, so I grudgingly forced myself to head that way. The bathroom was on the other side of the house, around a corner and past the kitchen, and finally down a long hallway on the right. So, after I made the trip and finished my business, I flipped off the light switch and started heading back to bed. When I heard the distinct click of the light switch, and I saw the glow of the bathroom light in the hallway behind me where I had just finished up. Terrified, I slowly turned around just to witness the light in the bathroom start clicking on and off. Finally, it shut completely off. In the dark of the hallway, my eyes began to make out a white shape near the end of the hall. It was around my size and crouched on the floor. A teaspoon I was frozen to the spot as my mind began realizing that no one else had come home except for my mom and myself. Then the white shape began whispering in a quiet man's voice. "Help me. I'm lost." I remember wanting to scream for my mom, but I couldn't, and instead I barely said, "No." This thing then started running at me on what sounded like all fours. I quickly ran through the kitchen and around the corner before running to my sleeping mother, shaking her awake. I remember saying, "It's coming, it's coming," and my mother's eyes going from dazed to alert in an instant. She asked me what was going on, and I saw her eyes look over my shoulder before she screamed. Remembering her scream still makes my blood run cold. Never had I heard pure terror like that in my life. Even to this day, she grabbed me by the arms and pulled me into my room and slammed the door. She held me in her arms with her back pressed against the door as we listened. It sounded like this thing was running around in circles in the kitchen. We could hear hands and feet slapping against the tiles. The kitchen had a sliding glass door to the outside, which sounded like it was thrown open and then slammed. We sat there, horrified, until daybreak. I was sent to my grandmother's in the next town over for a while after that and never set foot in that house again. Years later, my mother told me that the next day, she went walking around the property after the incident. When she did, she came across a small burial site that was heavily overgrown and 3 headstones that each belonged to children from the early 1900s. Upon some research, my mother found that this was our small town's first original cemetery, which only had a few people recorded to be buried there and had been forgotten and partially sunken into the earth. It freaks me out because what I heard that night was a man's voice, but it was so unnatural. My mom still will not tell me what she saw behind me and what it was that made her scream. At this point, I'm not quite certain what to make of this, but it was most certainly one of the more eerie things that I've ever experienced over the last couple of years. At the time of the encounter, I was visiting my grandfather in a dusty, dying small town somewhere out in the northwestern part of Texas. The town in question is one of those old-fashioned places where everyone knows everyone. All you really need to know about the town is that due to the recent abandonment by petrol companies, it's been on a steady decline towards desertion. The only people left are either old folks bent on going down with their ship or people who simply cannot afford to live anywhere else. The story begins deep in the dead of night. I'm not fully certain what time it was, but it was late. I was the last person in the house who was still awake. I spent a weekend-long trip committing 2 on-and-off photography shoots around town. I was interested in documenting the rusted remnants of a once prosperous town, knowing that the sky would likely be brilliantly lit so far from any major cities. I figured I'd just step out onto the porch and see if I could get a few decent shots. I was not even 5 seconds into my photo shoot before a relatively junky-looking car came screeching down the road, with its headlights on and music blaring. The house isn't too far from a corner, so unsurprisingly, the car came to a stop at the cross street. This is where it gets odd. Rather than yielding and then resuming its route after a short stop, the car stayed in place and the driver turned off their headlights. I just continued to take pictures while the car just sat there with the music blaring and the headlights off. It took a minute to register, but I began to feel watched. So, a bit confused and somewhat worried, I rushed back into the house. Immediately after I closed the door, the headlights of the car came back on and it went screeching off. After I left home from my city, my grandpa notified me that he had seen people in cars watching and keeping tabs on his house at all hours of the day. I'm well aware that the drug trade is somewhat prevalent in this town, but perhaps this was unrelated. I'm wondering if that was something I missed. I didn't hear anyone get out of the car after I went back inside. My best guess is that they saw me taking pictures out there in the dead of night and suspected that I was onto them. If so, should I be worried about having accidentally put my grandfather's house on their radar? Or maybe I might be overthinking the whole encounter. I head back to visit my grandfather often, so maybe I will learn more, or ideally not see that car again when I'm visiting. It was 8:30 p. on a Sunday night. I was getting back from a road trip with my boyfriend. We had just reached my home state, and my car was almost out of gas. We were on the freeway driving through a boring stretch of my state that's mainly cornfields, little neighborhoods, and the occasional store. We Googled mapped a gas station that was seemingly right off the freeway. Now, it was dark outside. It was kind of stormy all day, but at that time, it was only just a bit windy with some sprinkles here and there. We pulled off an exit that I've never been to before. The gas station was farther than it seemed on Google Maps, and I was getting really close to completely running out of gas. We drove for about 5 minutes on long stretches of roads, passing a church, some houses, but mainly empty land. We got to the hub of the small town, and I'm not even sure what city we were in. I saw a gas station up ahead, but it was not TH. For 10 years, I've been a long-haul trucker, crisscrossing the country from coast to coast. You see a lot out here, things you can explain and things you can't. Most of the time, it's just the hum of the engine and the endless ribbon of asphalt. But every now and then, the road shows you its darker side. These are 2 times it showed me something I'll never forget. My first story happened about 3 years into the job. I was running a load of produce from California to Chicago, a route I'd done 100 times. I was pushing through Nevada, deep in the desert. It was that strange time of night, maybe 2 or 3 a.m., when the world feels empty. And you're the only person awake. My fuel gauge was kissing empty, and my eyelids felt like they were lined with lead. Up ahead, a single flickering sign cut through the darkness. Gas had looked ancient, the kind of place that time forgot. But fuel is fuel, so I pulled my rig off the highway and rumbled down the dusty access road. The station was even creepier up close. Half the letters on the sign were burnt out. The pumps were old, mechanical ones with the spinning numbers. The only light came from the sign and a single, buzzing fluorescent bulb inside the convenience store. There wasn't another car, another soul in sight. As I stepped out of my cab, the silence was deafening. No wind, no crickets, just nothing. It felt like the air itself was holding its breath. I started to fuel up, the clank of the nozzle echoing in the stillness. I glanced toward the store and saw a figure standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the sickly yellow light. It was an old man, rail thin, wearing overalls and a greasy cap. He just stood there, watching me. I gave a little wave, you know, the way you do. He didn't wave back. He didn't move a muscle. The hair on my arms stood up. Something felt profoundly wrong. I finished pumping and walked toward the store to pay. The door creaked open before I reached it. Inside, the air was thick and smelled of dust and something else. Something metallic and vaguely sweet, like old pennies. The old man was now behind the counter, still silent. His eyes were what got me. They were pale, almost colorless, and they seemed to look right through me. "Just a fuel," I said, my voice sounding way too loud in the quiet room. He didn't respond. He just slowly, deliberately, rang up the sale on an ancient cash register. The clanging of the keys was the only sound. I handed him my card. He took it without touching my hand, his fingers like brittle twigs. As the machine processed the payment, he kept his eyes locked on mine. It wasn't a hostile stare, but it wasn't friendly either. It was completely empty, a void. I took my card and receipt. mumbled a thanks, and practically ran out of there. As I climbed back into my cab, I couldn't resist one last look. The old man was standing in the doorway again, in the exact same spot, watching. I fired up my engine, the roar of welcome comfort, and pulled away. As I merged back onto the highway, I checked my mirrors. The station's sign was gone. It wasn't just distant, it was gone. The entire place had vanished into the black desert. I even pulled over a mile down the road, heart pounding, and looked back. There was nothing. Just empty, starlit desert. To this day, I don't know what I saw. A ghost. A hallucination from exhaustion. All I know is the fuel I got there was real, and I never drove that stretch of highway at night again. The second incident happened a few years later. I was hauling a load through the Appalachian Mountains in West Virginia. If you've ever driven those roads, you know they're no joke. Twisting, two-lane highways that snake through dense forests with spotty at best cell service. It was late, past midnight, and a thick fog was rolling in, swallowing the road ahead. Visibility was down to maybe 50 feet. I was taking it slow, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. That's when I saw the headlights in my rearview mirror. A single car, keeping pace with me. It felt a little odd, someone tailing me so closely in these conditions, but I didn't think too much of it at first. Then, another set of headlights appeared in front of me, coming from a side road I hadn't even noticed. This car pulled out and slowed down, forcing me to drop my speed even more. So now I've got one car in front, one behind. My trucker's sixth sense was screaming. This is how hijackings happen. They box you in. I gripped the wheel tighter, my eyes darting between my mirrors and the road ahead. The cars were plain, dark sedans, no distinguishing features. Their windows were tinted so black I couldn't see who was inside. They just stayed there, perfectly positioned. The one behind was just close enough to be intimidating. The one in front, just slow enough to keep me crawling. We continued like this for what felt like an eternity. Probably 10 or 15 minutes. The fog was so thick, the forest on either side was just a dark, impenetrable wall. It felt like we were the only three vehicles in the entire world, trapped in our own little bubble of dread. I tried my radio. Static. My phone, of course, had no signal. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I was a sitting duck. I started running through my options. I could try to ram the car in front, but that was a huge risk on a winding mountain road. I could try to brake check the one behind, but what if they were armed? My mind was racing, but every scenario ended badly. All I could do was keep driving, trapped in their silent, mobile frisson. Then, as we rounded a sharp bend, the car in front sped up. Not a gradual acceleration, but like it was shot out of a cannon. It just vanished into the fog. A second later, I checked my mirrors, and the car behind was gone too. Not turned off, not faded into the distance, just gone. One moment it was there, its headlights burning holes in my mirror. The next, there was only blackness and swirling fog. I drove for another hour, adrenaline coursing through my veins, half expecting them to reappear at any moment, but they didn't. When I finally reached a truck stop, I pulled over, shaking. I got out and did a walk around of my rig, looking for, I don't know what. There was nothing. No marks. No damage. It was as if it never happened. I've tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Two separate drivers being cautious in the fog, but the way they appeared and disappeared. The perfect, menacing coordination. It doesn't sit right. It felt intentional. It felt predatory. Like I was being toyed with by something out there in the fog-drenched woods, like the gas station. It's another piece of the road I carry with me. A reminder that when you're out here alone in the dark, you're never really alone. So, next time you on a lonely highway late at night and you see a lone trucker rumbling by, who's to remember? We see things out here that would make your blood run cold. The road has secrets, and sometimes it likes to share them. Thanks for listening.